Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to be talking more about fear and how to come back to the present, how to stay centered, how to come back to the new story that you want to create when you are afraid that the old story is playing out again or something that you fear is playing out again. Now, if you didn't watch my last video, I recorded these at the same time. This one's recorded right after the other one, and there's like a flash flood warning. So if you hear some really cool nature sounds in the back, it's just providing that beautiful thunderstorm ASMR for us. So I would like to expand upon the thoughts I had in the last video that came out around fear. And specifically, like, okay, Alex, I've heard everything that you're talking about and like I get it, right? But what am I supposed to do about it? Honestly, no clue, but I'll tell you what I did. Because I think that it is, or I believe that it is such a unique experience, an individual experience based on where we're at in our personal journey. And I can tell you right now that the biggest thing that you can do is develop that faith and trust and love for yourself. So really work on your self-concept. There's a million videos of people talking about it out there. Work on your core wounding, work on your belief system, work on, abandonment issues, feeling unworthy, scarcity mindset, and work on yourself, because the more you work on that relationship that you have with yourself and building yourself up, the stronger of a foundation you have, the more you have something to come back to. It's like, think about if you are like learning how to do a trapeze. This is a terrifying analogy immediately. Maybe I could go to, okay. Imagine that you're a child and you're learning how to ride a bike for the first time. Can you imagine if you're like a toddler and your parents just put you on like a whole child's bike with no training wheels and they're like, go figure it out. They don't even tell you, here's the brake, you push the pedals. They're just like, here, you're gonna fall over and crack your head open, if you don't get this right the first time. That is what it's like if you do not have that support system within yourself. You basically have nothing to fall back on. It's going to hurt. You're reinforcing your negative thoughts and wounds and beliefs if you don't have that support system to fall back on. It's literally gonna hurt. The analogy I was gonna use is like, imagine if you're training with the like circus for the trapeze or something and you have like no like cables attached to you or something, but hopefully it's not that dramatic. And there's no net. Yeah, we don't want to do that, right? I'm gonna go back to the child analogy. Now imagine if your parents put you on the same big bike that maybe it's too big for you and you're wobbling and you're like, I can't control this thing, Like basically I'm saying, work within your means. The more you take care of yourself and the more that you understand what your needs are and you go and meet those needs. Your parents invest in the tiny tricycle that's gonna give you the confidence, the safety, and security. They get you a helmet. Maybe they put little knee pads on you, little elbow pads. You see what I'm saying? You gotta do this for yourself, because then if you fall off, it's not gonna be so bad. You just get back up again. You brush yourself off, it's fine. If you're a little toddler and you're on a giant child's bike with no helmet, no knee pads, nothing, and your parents just like push you down a hill, gonna get some cuts and bruises, right? Okay. So moving on. That is the best thing that you can do for yourself. Now, I am going to share a vague personal story, but then I'm gonna get very specific about how I got through a fear situation where I could have very easily manifested and perhaps even started to manifest out of fear. So I am developing a relationship, and in developing this relationship, I started to get triggered that my old negative patterns were going to play out again. And there were times where it was very easy to notice, oh, this is coming from fear and I don't want to act on this. And I was able to, soothe myself, come back to my faith and trust, and everything was fine. But one day it was so sneaky that it just felt like, oh, but this makes sense that I would need to take this action, because who wouldn't, kind of thing. And it's not going to benefit you for me to get into the specifics, but basically I was following a lot of advice that you would see on the internet, and you do see on the internet. And I've said this before and I'll say it again. I think a lot, or I believe that a lot of advice is fear-based. Think about, you're like, oh, I kind of want to quit my job and start my own company. And how many people are like, oh my gosh, I don't know if you should do that, or you should do, X, Y, Z, just in case it doesn't work out, right? That's fear-based. And I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with that, right? Like, fear is a helpful tool for survival, but it can be detrimental depending on what kind of a journey you're on and what kind of experience you're trying to have. For me personally, I'm working on eliminating as much fear-based action as possible. I want to see how deeply I can surrender into faith and like grace and just ease, and just that knowing that everything will work out for me and not having to fear anything. And I don't know how humanly possible, that level is gonna be for me to achieve, but I'm going for it. That's what feels right for me. So I kind of start this conversation out of fear, and I don't realize that I'm starting a conversation out of fear until it becomes very clear in something the other person says, that they are experiencing some fear themselves. And it triggered me to look within and realize, because I just recognized that they were acting in a way that was from fear. Like there was something that was coming up and it was coming from fear. And I was like, oh, okay, I can witness this, in this other person. And then I realized it was like a direct line, like a mirrored line. And I was like, oh, dang, I was also acting on fear and didn't even realize it. So then I was able to reflect on that. I was able to acknowledge that and take accountability for that. And this conversation that seemed like it was kind of going downhill in a very upsetting way, all of a sudden turned into a beautiful, productive, strengthening moment. But I can't remember quite when this other conversation happened, but during this time, while I'm contemplating, did I do the right thing? Did I say the right thing? Am I really acting in a way that's in alignment for me? I'm just trying to navigate something that's totally new for me. I have a conversation with a good friend of mine. This conversation is where I'm going to impart these realizations that I had around why I took the fear-based action. And maybe, I don't know, you guys will take whatever you want from it. So what I discovered was, so I'm telling my friend, well, I'm afraid of this, thing that's happening right now, because in the future, like potentially years from now, what if it means all these other things? And to my brain, this was a very logical process. I've heard people, specifically women, say these things on the internet, and it seemed like a very reasonable thing, right? A lot of people operate in this way. Whatever is happening right now means that things in the future are going to be just the same or worse, like it almost never gets better kind of thing. And I think that's a very fear-based or scarcity mindset, like obviously you want to be looking out for yourself, but the assumptions that are happening, right, are fear-based. So my friend tells me that they think that I am getting ahead of myself and that I am so far out in the future, I've lost sight of the present moment, and that it's very difficult to build the future that I would want if I'm not living in the present moment. And I was like, oh my God, because this friend and I have different philosophies on life and spirituality. Like, they have their own approach. We're also very similar in ways, but we're also very different. So I was like, oh my God, they don't even realize that they're basically telling me that in me living so far out in the fear-based future that I'm afraid of, that's what I'm manifesting in the current moment. And that's why my fear was intensifying, because I was holding that energy. And so I was feeling that future being created. And so now I'm afraid of this thing that I am creating. But if I could just sit in the present moment and hold faith, that would dissolve all of that, because I'm no longer aligning myself with it. And so I had this vision of like what this looks like. And this analogy that I came up with that I'm so excited to share with you guys, I'm calling it the bridge analogy. Okay, so imagine that you are standing on a cliff's edge, or like a canyon, right? And there's like, it's not too far away, it's nothing crazy, but just over there is like another piece of land, and you really want to bridge that gap, right? There's a major crevasse, there's a canyon, there's a cliff, whatever. There's a river down there. You don't want to fall in. It's way too far, right? It's way too high up. You want to get to that island or the other piece of land, and there's just no way to get to it unless you bridge this crevice. So you could stand there and be like, how do I get there? But we're resourceful, right? So I call up a contractor. I'm like, hey man, can you build me this bridge? And he's like, I got you. He comes out, he surveys, he figures out what kind of materials he needs, so the length of time it's going to take, right? Blah, 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 blah. Now he's got to go get the crew together, get a schedule together, get the materials ordered, have them delivered, begin building the bridge. Like, there's all these things that are going to start happening, right? I'm not just, like, I'm standing here knowing I'm going to get to that other side because I've put the plan in action. And I understand that the bridge can be built, right? So I'm standing here and I know that the bridge is going to be built. I'm going to be able to walk across. But imagine that they're only like a little bit into the construction and they've built like a third of the bridge. Would it make sense for me to start trying to walk across it and then freak out and be like, why couldn't I walk across it? Because the bridge isn't done, lady. But this is what I was mentally doing and energetically doing. I was living in the present, knowing that I'm creating the future that I want, but it's not quite there yet. And then freaking out that it wasn't done because I just wasn't coming into that moment. And I think I could do a whole video on time, like past, present, future, but I'll keep it short in saying that a lot of spiritual figures and metaphysical experts and leaders, people that we can look up to, that they have a really strong understand that pretty much the only thing that exists is the present moment, and that is the only space that you create from. Whatever energy you are holding is what is being created, and you are in the present every second, right? You're constantly in the present. You're in the present right now, right now, right now, right now. There is no such thing as future. There's also no such thing as past. We're not going to get into this. Let me know if you want me to get into it in another video. But do you see what I'm saying? If you are living in the imagination of a scary future, something you're afraid of, and you're afraid that you might align with it, you're afraid that this is something that you might be in energetic alignment with, you have not put yourself in that state of frequency. Now, this is different than like a quick thought or just a little whisper of your conscious mind being like, oh my God, what if this happens again? And you're just like, no, it's fine, that's different. But when you are fully embodying that energy of fearing the very future that you are creating, because that is the energy you're holding in the present moment, and that is what you're creating. And then I think that this is why like our fears start to build and intensify because we are holding this fear. We are holding this fear. This is our energy, and it's starting to manifest. And if you are in tune with your vibration, you feel that you are now aligning to it. So it's going to start feeling real. And that's why you're going to become more afraid of it, because you're like, oh my God, I know this is going to happen. Yes, it is. It doesn't have to. It doesn't have to. Unless you have a story that's like, no, it has to happen. This is just all I get, you know? This is why like revising our stories are so important. There's so much that goes into creating our future and reconditioning our negative cycles and negativity, honestly. It's a lot. It's a lot. But yeah, coming back to the present. Stop thinking about the future in terms of like the advice you've heard on the internet. Stop listening to other people's advice for a little bit. Stop seeking external validation. Don't listen to the tarot card readings. Don't listen to that relationship coach or that career coach or the whatever coach. I guess that could even mean don't listen to me, but I feel like I'm not in that same category. I really hope that this isn't coming across wrong, or that I'm like horrifically not self-aware. But my intent is always to give you advice and push you in the direction of listening to yourself and having you become your best resource and your best source of wisdom, intelligence, direction. Whereas other people are going to be like, no, do this, do that kind of thing. And I guess in a way I am doing it. I don't know. I'm going too deep into this. You are your best resource, and you create your future. You create your present, because the future doesn't really exist, right? The future, in a way, start to maybe reimagine it as like, the future is your imagination, so it can be anything. And then whatever imagination you hold, and you can feel that you deserve that imagination, that imaginative storyline, that you feel you deserve it, that is what is going to start creating in the present moment. Oh, and I just remembered that I wanted to talk about this. I heard someone talking about it online, and it was like the perfect phrasing, and of course I've sort of forgotten it already, and I want to do a whole other video. I don't know if I'll have time today, but they said that it was Abraham Hicks doing like a channeled message, which is like a whole other thing, because I kind of love most of what they say, or I really love most of what they say, but then there's other stuff where I feel it's like, anyway, we're all imperfect beings. So they said that when you imagine whatever it is that you want, you have to be okay with not really having it, which I'm sure you've heard before, but they specifically use the word, you can't be resentful or ungrateful. Like, you can't get upset that you don't have it. So you can't be like, oh, like I really want, to get this job, and every day you go into your actual job, you're like, oh God, why haven't they hired me yet? Because now you're reaffirming the fact that they haven't hired you, and they're not going to, because we create from our present moment. This is rough. This is tough. This is difficult to start practicing, but life is about expansion and growth. You're laying in bed and you want your sweetheart next to you, and you drift off to sleep, and the next day you wake up and you're like, but they're not actually here. You want that new car, but every time you get in your car, you're like, this piece of crap. I'm like, I can't believe that I have to deal with this every day. I have to deal with this every day, right? That's the story. That's the story. So really take a look at what stories you're telling yourself in the present, and how that's going to create your present moment moving forward. This touched my hand, and I just like had a panic attack that it was a bug. On that note, I'm going to leave you guys to it. what did you think of this? I was really excited for this video, so I really want to hear you guys' thoughts. Is there something I could expand more upon? I don't know. What do you want to hear me talk about next? Yeah, let me know. Let me know how you guys are doing. Just check in, just say hey. I love hearing from you guys. Like I said, I just recorded this one right after the last video that came out this week. So the personal update in terms of like how everything's going since the accident is still the same. Things are going, things are moving, things are flowing. I'm excited for all of the changes this summer, even though they are not the most comfortable. I am very excited for the results because I know it's going to be worth it. It gets a little bit easier every day, sort of. But lots of changes, lots of transformation, lots of old things coming up recently too, that some of them didn't trigger me and some of them triggered like old reactions, and then I was like, oh, whew, no, that's not me anymore. We don't have to worry about this. Yeah. Anyway, thank you for tuning into this video. Can't wait to hear your thoughts. All my links are down below. See you in the next one.